This is the 8th year of C, and we have been having this kind of eventful gathering for a week almost since the first year. So it is a pleasure to kind of have all these people coming from different places to discuss many questions, and fill up the bank of questions and inquiries that we at the school celebrate, really kind of cherish. Today is the first, you all will be able to see the event list as you go through the exhibition, which has been put up downstairs. But what I'll do is I'll kind of give a short kind of background to this event, which is the annual graduate symposium. It has been organized, conceptualized since the last year, when we felt that we need to bring together the young graduates who are also, you know, um, um, coming out of the architectural institutions, and bring them in contact with each other to discuss several things about practice, having a long-term vision for their practice, and also have a platform where they can connect with each other as a peer network outside of the kind of regular academic setting. And so we instituted this graduate symposium as a part of our annual week. And it's a very interesting cusp where, you are graduate and not yet, and we still kind of perceive you as students. And I'm always flipping between graduate and student. So please don't mind me flipping on that while I address you. And the idea here is to soften this space, this transition space from the space of the academy into the space of practice. Since last year we opened the question of how to have longer inquiries, and we had titled the symposium "Long Questions," which aim to, have questions uh, which are not project based. Like as soon as we graduate, architects very quickly get into the trap of finding their next project, and rather than that, we thought of why not coax, fresh graduates of architecture to think of inquiries rather than projects to procure next. And in that spirit, we kind of came to this year's idea doubts. And the spirit of this symposium was primarily to open up this very soft space of vulnerability which we hold as we step out from the institution. And we are very quick in discarding all our, so to say, doubts while we step into the profession, because you are expected to be clear, you are expected to deliver, you are expected to find yourself that label which will be printed on your visiting card or now your websites and stuff like that. And for a person like me, it was extremely difficult even after doing my masters how to define myself, because I was doing many things like many of you. And this thing has only kind of become more expanded in the last 10 years. So which I also got to read through your diverse engagements in your bios that you shared. So with that, what we will be doing in this conversation today is opening up these doubts between us as a group, and also then inviting our audience to share and expand upon that space of ambiguity, that space of ambivalence, which actually can be projected uh, back onto the professional space that you are soon going to be completely absorbed into, in order to interrogate rather than completely get sucked into that space. And uh, Before doing that, I also want to acknowledge the whole team at C who created this platform for receiving such a symposium and all these discussions. I want to acknowledge the presence of our partner trust, Suvidya Prasarak Sangh, and we have today Devyani Sabnis ma'am. I'm very happy to have you. So and finally all the students who put together so many things over the last few days with us. So thank you so much. And with that, the first thing I will ask our panelists to do is give a very short introduction to each other as well as the audience about what you're doing, where you're from, and anything else you want to add. So maybe I can pass on from there.
Hi, I'm Vanchika. I'm a fresh graduate from Rachna Sansad. I graduated last April, and currently I'm a freelancing designer. I have been experimenting with various fields of design in the past few months. For example, I worked with a set designer. I've been trying to get a hang of interior designing. And more importantly, I have been working under an NGO called Earthen Roots, which deals with permaculture. And I'm trying to navigate how permaculture and architecture can be merged together. This is something that I realized when I was doing my thesis. This is something that I realized when I was doing my thesis is that I, for one, really appreciate iterations and research, and which is why this phase for me is quite crucial to understand how all of that can be linked together. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, so I'm Sanya and I've studied at sea. So feels great to be back like this. Um, so I started my own practice after I graduated in 2020. Uh, in the start, it was borrowing from my thesis of free developments, and we were trying to work in the space of how to nudge the normal builder narratives towards like quality of space and all those other discussions that we keep having in college. So we did a whole research and application based thing regarding that. Along with that, we were working on other different projects which were into mainstream architecture and like retrofitting second homes of people rather than just building from scratch. And currently, I'm working on an urban design project in collaboration with Design Cell Mumbai, which is dealing with the urban design of Andheri East Station and the neighboring areas.
Hello, I'm Divya. I am a recent graduate from Rizvi. I'm working with Faizan Khatri, and I have been working as a writer with Contractors of Bombay. And after graduation, I've also worked on a short film called Chaviwalas of Mumbai, which was made for Charles Korea Foundation on civic issues of Mumbai. Yeah, I think that's all about my work. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Armia. I've also graduated from Rizvi College in 2022. Um, my undergrad thesis was based on tracing nomadic tribes of Kashmir and seeing what home and space meant to them, and sort of blurring the lines between transitory and sedentary spaces, and sort of to integrate them back into society. I'm also very passionate about filmmaking, and I feel like after having worked on two film sets and assisted on two film sets, both in direction as well as production design, I feel like something that fascinates me about the field of architecture is the multidisciplinary nature of it. Um, Currently, I'm working as a junior architect at Sameer Padora and Associates. So, thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Abdul Kader and I'm a recent graduate from ISCOA Bandra. And throughout my college years as a student, I was very conscious about the gap that the industry and our education has. And I tried to do multiple internships and I tried to skill myself in various digital tools like parametric scripting and generative design and BIM so that it would give me a boost in my career. Spoiler alert, it didn't. And right now I'm working in a commercial practice and I'm trying to understand the business which governs the entire architectural practice in India and the entire real estate market. And I believe that architects have a very strong potential in business, and if we can tap that skill and if we can master it and if we can harvest it, maybe at education level or at practice level, we can make a lot of progress in the right direction. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Saloni Makwana. I'm also a recent graduate from IES, College of Architecture. I am currently working at Urban Center Mumbai, which is a practice which engages in urban design projects and urban planning research. I joined there as as an intern 2 years ago, and then I never left thanks to the lockdown. So I'm just exploring in those fields, and yeah, that's about it.
Hello, my name is Ronak Soni. I'm a recent graduate from School of Environment and Architecture. Hi. So, uh, currently I'm working as a art director for a game trailer with Electronic Arts, and then as an architect with Beyond Design. In parallel to these, I try to do like multiple things in UX with different companies and virtually intensive fields and a bit of AR development with Electronic Arts and Parallel HQ. Alongside, I am one of the participating artists in the Mumbai Urban Art Festival, which is live right now. I'll be presenting in the London Festival of Arts in the upcoming cycle. I've also assisted Bar Studios and Drux Media Collective for some of their art installations. That's it. Like I like maths, code, drawing.
Thank you. That was a very interesting mix of backgrounds, and what struck my mind was when Abdul spoke about the gap between the industry and education, while others were still kind of figuring out in terms of what they want to do, and some are very happily kind of really straddling in diverse kind of fields. One of the first things that I wanted to really ask is, or open up rather, in terms of this whole thing about how much do you feel after a 5-year architecture education as aligned to the market, and thinking through Abdul's kind of, this whole, the way in which he framed it, the gap, and do you like, I just want to kind of understand if you are conscious of this gap while you are studying, and you already start preparing yourself towards filling that gap, in the sense that you are already trying to fit into a perceived idea of an architect, versus the way in which you feel that market can catch on to you. So I just wanted to kind of have your thoughts on how you, and in some sense, reflecting upon the 5 years of education as to what you receive as education and how you are absorbed into the space of profession. So any reflections on that? Abdul, would you like to?
Um, Currently, like Anuj asked, if I'm doing something to sort of mitigate that gap, I am, yeah, sorry. I'm not, I'm just trying to absorb everything that comes my way at this point. I have realized that a lot of stuff that we are taught in college, although it is right, it's not in practice because it doesn't make economic sense in commercial, what do you call, practice. The, the most common example is parking layouts, right? We are told to have 3 meter turning radiuses, we are told to have at least 6 meter driveway, but people get away with 5.5, 5 meter driveways, in fact. And similarly, I'm also trying to figure out what architect is, I mean, what how will I define my services to someone who's not from this planet, let's say, right? What, like, if they ask, like, who are architects and what, like, role do you play in society, I don't have an answer, right? It can be varied, it can be our own individual definition, so I guess I'm trying to find my own definition for that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the gap?
um I need to articulate this. I guess the best way to describe it would be, the first tens of sets of drawings that I did in my office were all wrong. I mean, it made sense from, like, what I've learned from college, but there were gaps. There were things that were not right. There were things which Like for example, I was taking too much space for my using too much space for my corridor. We don't think in that way, to be honest. The cost and time are not constraints when we are studying design, and I'm not saying that these are the right constraints to follow and these are how it should be, but it is how it is at this point. And I'm just trying to understand, how to strike a balance between it, because I can go in a rural area and practice however I want with like the idealistic approach, but it doesn't solve any problem, right? We need cities, we need urban centers, and we need them to be very sustainable, and we need them to be very we need them to serve the society in a more social sense more than an economic sense. So I guess, yeah, that's the I'm trying.
Um, I can just talk of my own experience. So in college, my thesis was basically related to the welfare of um, these nomadic tribes and trying to integrate them back into society versus what I'm doing right now is building homes for rich people and getting paid peanuts while I'm doing that. What I'm trying to get at is in college, a lot of the times, the solutions that we come up with are very policy based. And when you go out in the real world, you kind of realize that that's not in your hands. All of that is not in your hands. You sort of have to accept the fact, at least this is where I am right now, where I'm still grappling with the fact that okay, I cannot solve all of these issues just by being an architect. They're very policy driven, like the government has a lot to do with that as well. And what you end up doing is then designing massive toilets and driveways and parkways and bedrooms for these rich people. Um, so that's where I'm at right now.
So what my understanding from both of your reviews is that maybe in college we can have a particular subject which would be solely meant for like, okay, this is your project and this is the budget, and then you somehow try and balance and see that, because whenever you come up with any suggestions, they're like, oh, we can't afford it, and then it has to go through iterations. And we were even in my internship, we were asked to make tender set for a particular client, and we worked like for about I think 15 overnights, and because they said that no, not 3 months, we wanted within so much so time, and then they just said, oh, you know what, this is going a little above budget and we can't afford it. And that is something that I didn't realize, because I was in my own world. I was like, oh, this might look nice, this might look nice, but at the end of the day, of course, clients do matter, but we should also be able to, promptly give suggestions to the same. And maybe that idea of succumbing to what the client wants should be introduced in the college itself.
So I feel like the conversations that we have in college with all of our peers and faculty, we are in a way brought up through 5 years in that conversation. So we think that language is very like normal and everyone might understand what you're trying to say. So like when we started doing this redevelopment thing, we thought that ठीक है, research किया बहुत सारा, like for thesis, we can take it into the field and test it out. But it was a shock. Like when we took it to the field, no one understood what we're saying. People were like, what do you mean? What is the FSI? How much are we going to get? Like they were throwing numbers at us. And they didn't understand what we were saying. We didn't understand what they were saying. Like basics of FSI we knew, but how does the entire economy work? We didn't know that. So I realized that uh, getting our conversations into the mainstream is what is the biggest gap. Like we know what we're talking about, no one else does. So then we had these conversations with certain societies which were up for self redevelopment, because that is the space architects can operate in. Everything else is taken up by the builder. So we tried to find this niche which was self redevelopment, because the builder doesn't go for those projects. There's no economic profits in that. So we tried entering that system and we tried having meetings with these societies and like explaining to them what quality of space is. And what that required us to do was reflect a lot ourselves in how to make like the most mundane elements like a window develop into a certain way which would make people understand what we mean by that. So that was the whole thing. But we realized this is not like working out, because it's a long journey, right? Like we have lived this journey for 5 years, we've studied that. People are not there yet. They are all okay with the narrative of like the amenities or like the the swimming pools and all of these things that they'll be getting in redevelopment. So then, so I feel like like to begin with, intervening in a space in which you can work in hand with them might be a start. So we started doing a different thing of like, you know, providing consultation to the builders themselves on the plans that they've already designed, rather than going with my own set of designs, because no one is able to understand that right now. So maybe the idea is to nudge that system towards something that architects might think as good quality space. So the gap is in the conversation, I feel like, right now.
I actually had a question, if I can proceed with. So, like what she said about buildings and builders' lobby, it is a thing which we all are aware about, and we know that whatever they ask of and whatever they make the users dream of, like a dream house, a flat, mostly, it works in formulas, it works in numbers. But then they end up making spaces which are buildings that are just 15 meters apart and 15 floors tall. The first 4 floors won't even get sunlight, further forget the wind and all. So like when we as architects are working on such solutions, I want to understand that why don't we have certain rules and regulations in place that also take care of the quality of space that we are providing a user through these builders. And it's not just the builders are giving us formulas that you have to build this. So, why is there a lack of conversation between this whole scenario between user, builder, and the architect? So, if anyone wants to.
Yeah, so my doubt started a bit before theirs. Like I've not reached that state, I feel. But when I was interviewing and then I started, so I had been working for some time. So when I was doing the interviews, I was not almost saying as like just out of the field. Like I would talk to these firms that I got a chance to work on an assist for an art installation, or I've done this game development where I was designing these rooms and these spaces because they are also as spatial for me, and in interviews. And except two of them, the polite ones would be like, but that's not really architecture. No, they would end up as a question, and the rude ones would straight up say that's not really architecture. And I was not able to understand where are they coming from. Versus when I entered EA, I had applied as a concept artist. I was basically in charge of doing these drawings. But and when I was first introduced to them, we were talking, I told them that, oh, I'm currently doing architecture. I was a student back then. So they started coming up with a very different set of questions. Like it was a 2 month project, and somebody would come up to me like, hey, can we design this table? I was like, sure. I never took it that way. And then there was this one meeting, and it was like a small house space, and they were discussing how to make it more scary. It was part of the game. So these people were suggesting something, and that guy that looks at me, and I was also trying to say in terms of light and sound, and that the guy just stares it to me, and he's like, "Aren't you an architect?" And that one hit me a lot more. And even in terms of UI spaces, the way when I approach them or I talk to them, they somehow change their vocabulary when they're talking to me versus they're talking to fellow UI designers. They would talk to me more like in terms of, I feel their vocabulary tends more towards space. Like they'll say, how can we arrange this here, or a layout. Like I feel those fields somehow accept or understand architecture much better than, like I was not able to figure out what were architects expecting themselves when I was doing these interviews, and they would straight up like negate that that's not really architecture. I'm like, it's a big installation, it's a big space, like we have done that. And the one which was very rude, I almost got into like an argument. So at one point I asked him straightforward, then what do you think? And he started throwing a lot of WD words which I was not aware of, and then said like, "Do you even know how much does a tile cost?" I said no, but if we fix one, I'll find a supplier for you and I'll get a quote. And then he hung up the call on me, which I felt was not that of an answer though.
We have Vedika with us who was stuck in traffic, and I want to welcome you to the panel. What we are discussing, Vedika, is how much we feel. Number one, we started with Abdul's provocation on his perceived sense of gap between education and the profession. And then we kind of started um, um, opening up uh, how misaligned do we feel with the profession today. But before like asking you to respond, I would like you to give a very quick introduction of you so that we all warm up to you as a panel.
Hi everyone. Firstly, sorry for the delay. I was really stuck in traffic, but anyway, yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah. So I'm Vedika, and I graduated from LS Raheja, and I'm currently working at the architecture company, which is in Mulund. It's a design firm, and I am very passionate about space architecture. So for my thesis, I chose a topic to design a habitat on the Martian surface. And right now, I am, along with my current architecture work, I am going on to doing my research work in space architecture as well. And I have even opened my own website. So like I I basically, the idea was to push the boundaries of architecture and see how designs for outer space can help in designs on Earth. So, and understanding the technologies and all of that. So that's about it. And yeah, thank you so much.
So, I was just thinking about this whole contrast between the quality and quantity that most of you didn't speak at all. So, would you like to add anything to the?
So actually, I'm not the first architect in my family. My dad's sister is already an architect. So when I started, when I joined college and I was studying, my start point was actually that, oh, she has a traditional interior design, retail design practice, and she's doing well for herself. So my start point was actually like, I was saying what all of them have said in some way or form, which is that I can always come back to this practice. So now I want to use my time and I want to engage with the community, and I want to engage, like, I want to make a difference through policy making and all of those things which were already discussed. But I wasn't prepared for what it actually means. Like, I feel like we keep saying the right things, which is that I want to do good. I want to not be caught up in this builder driven architectural practice. I don't want to do that. But I feel like now that I'm working in the public space, I'm working on public projects, I'm engaging with urban local bodies. Uh, it's different from what you would imagine it to be, and it comes back to, like, a lot of times I feel insufficient, or like not, like my doubts stem from communication gaps, essentially. Because I'm trying to figure out what I want to do, I'm trying to figure out how to communicate with my peers who are not, like, most of my peers are not working in the public sector. They have the more traditional architectural firms. And so I'm trying to figure out how to communicate with them. I'm trying to figure out how to communicate with my family and my friends, and how to tell them about the work I'm trying to do. And at the same time, while I'm at work, there are so many agencies and there are so many levels of communication which needs to be handled. So I feel like right now, the thing I'm trying to learn the most is how do I how do I get the patience to come up with these explanations, because I have to explain to someone what I'm trying to do, whether it be on site with a contractor, whether it be to someone from a urban local body, whether it be to an architect who's just completely, like, for example, Kadir, we know each other. He is working in the proper commercial sector. So even explaining what I do on a daily to him is sometimes difficult. So that's where I'm at.
So, thank you for adding that bit. And I was thinking again, continuing my trail of thought, that this treading the path between quality and quantity, and it seems that that's where all of you are kind of, in some sense, sailing. And the big question in that kind of sailing is the question of language. That how do you communicate, and and why does it again, I'm coming back to questioning our pedagogical systems, because that's the space I've spent more time in, or I rather spend more time in. Why does it become difficult for us to communicate this aspect of quality to the public, which actually must be of so much concern to them? And if you kind of, how do you deal?
Hello. Yeah. So I means when the question started, it said that there is a gap between the education and profession, but nobody thought that other way around. There is a the education is already a lot more, and then the profession has a gap that we cannot communicate with them. Is the other way around? And then we need to think through this in a little more different perspective, because but what happens is basically here everybody spoke taking that point that there is a gap in the education, and what do we do for, in the education back and not in the profession. So everybody spoke. It seems like everybody is saying that education needs to be somehow thought a little differently, so that profession would be, or selling into the profession will be more smoother. Uh, is it really, or do we need the way around thinking in this? Just this question, I just felt.
So actually, the question that I initially wanted to ask to everyone was that how do we now brand ourselves, like on a personal basis and as a profession? Because again, as you said, that we do a lot of things, and to be honest, I thoroughly enjoyed my 5 years of architecture. It enabled me to have my own opinions, and to actually be able to think for the future, which is something that I initially imagined that we would be doing, as compared to when we see that as a profession like law, or as doctors, if they go on strikes, that they will, like, at the end of the day, end up getting some or the other remuneration or some solution to it. But architects, in a way, currently I feel the image is that we're very replaceable, like, in the sense that, oh, contractor will give us some solution to it, or there are apps now that, this is the requirement and you'll get a house based on it. So then how do we make ourselves more relevant with the contemporary times, that, that, okay, if this particular profession isn't there, then we may be lacking in some way or the other. So as you said, education wise, I do feel like we did learn a lot. Of course, there will always be a discrepancy with all fields. I've heard from multiple sources that, we will be doing different things when we get into field. But then how do we now tell everyone, oh, this is what we do and this is what we can offer, and we are irreplaceable in these aspects. So, yeah.
Yeah, precisely. And in that spirit, just reframing Milin's question, because it's very interesting the way he poses this gap, where what Milind is saying is that the gap may be there, but who needs to catch up to whom? Does the profession need to catch up with the academy, which is actually exposing you to so many more things and probably even new things? Or is it the academy which needs to catch up deals of economic logistics and all those things? So yeah, I'm just kind of reframing your question for all of you. And what do you think?
I think um, the vagueness of this question, I think I can tell you an instant. I think it's to some extent. I once had to fight with a client, like the representative of the client, for giving a handicap toilet because it was eating more room from the sellable shops, right? And I was not doing anything wrong, but I had to compromise on my design, not give a handicap. Somehow he was not, worried about not getting an approval. So it's a whole a different conversation there. But yeah, so I think education is not really falling behind, but at the same time, we'll have to understand how we can frame the education, which in a sense that it becomes more like how Vanshik also told that we are really very replaceable. Like the client was able to fight with me because he thought कि ये नहीं करेगा तो मैं दूसरा लेके आऊँगा, right? We need to find that relevance, that they will listen to us and they will maybe compromise on their profits to serve a basic handicap toilet at least, right? Yeah.
So to answer your question, I think that the academics, in whatever state they are in, they are fairly well defined. And I felt like in the 5 years of learning architecture, things are structured. There are like exercises, and you have a mentor who's going to guide you. But when I started off in the professional world, my first question was actually like, how do you actually define an architectural practice, right? So this gap also, I believe, varies depending on the practice you're talking about. So will the gap, so if you take a commercial practice and then you compare it to the education we've all had for 5 years, that gap might mean different things. In my case, it means different things. So I just feel like, so I mean, just to give an example, if someone says, hi, I'm so and so and I'm a gynac, then you exactly know what that person does. But if I just go in a room, if I walk into a room and I say, hi, I'm an architect, it'll mean different things to different people. It could mean that I'm, maybe doing product design, maybe I'm designing the interiors, or I'm doing commercial interiors, or I'm doing urban design. So I just think that it, the the definition of that gap cannot be vague, and just we can't just as a blanket statement say that there's a gap. There need to be very specific parameters applied to that discussion before coming to a definitive answer. Hello, if I can add something. So I feel like what you said is very interesting, but I feel that is the beauty of it. Like, of course, there's a lot of confusion, but I feel like there are like researchers on one end, and people who are doing a lot of stuff like that, and then there are like the mainstream commercial designers. I feel like it's very important for someone to operate in the middle of these two things. I'm sorry. So someone needs to operate between these two things, right? Otherwise, of course, there are some practical things with education that are absent, but all in all, the educational place is very like overwhelming in a good way. Like, it is a lot of knowledge, it is a lot of exploration, research, whereas the practice is very underwhelming compared to that. Like, you know a mountain, but you're supposed to do something in one corner. So it's that. But as long as these two things remain separate, no one can operate between that. And I think that is the beauty of our role not being defined, because we can nudge this towards what we know is a mountain, right? Like, it's full of possibilities.
I feel like the question about why and how do we define ourselves also stems from the fact that are we as a community one like speaking more from what you said, if I reject or if I say no to doing something at a certain price, there are 10 other people who are going to stand up and do it for half the price and for less than the time that I'm going to take. So, where is the sort of community that we have as a profession?
So actually, why I spoke about what how do you define the practice is not because I don't like that there is so much variation or disparity in the type of practices. What I mean is that we all know, like right now, when we're speaking about that, oh, there are so many differences in our practice, I know that everyone in this room is understanding exactly what I'm saying. Like, I don't need to explain myself. But the thing is that, are we able to communicate it to even our immediate family or friend circle? Do my, like, I think that that communication is way more important than us like constantly trying to understand each other. Because if I can do 10 things, but I cannot explain it to someone who's a non architect, then what are those 10 skills good for? So that is where I'm coming from. Like, it's great that everyone's doing different things. It's great that there are so many options and paths and explorations you can do. But I feel like um, I, at least personally, I feel like after a point I lose patience. Like, how am I supposed to explain to someone that, oh, like I can design a building, but I also like to do art, and but actually I want to, like, I want to practice in the urban space and engage in policy making. So it's important for someone to take me seriously. I have to tell them exactly what I do. And so you would, so if a doctor just came to you and said, I do 10 things, would you be happy? You wouldn't be. You trust the doctor with decisions because you know exactly what the doctor is capable of doing. In a similar way, I just feel like if I'm able to explain to somebody what I do, then I'll be better at just existing in the professional space.
I think it's also important to acknowledge the fact that yes, there is a big gap, and why does the learning have to begin from there as well? Like right after we graduate as well. When you graduate, you realize that yes, what I did in the 5 years was very important. It taught me how to think and to analyze and to design. But it's also not a lot of the skill sets that are required in the professional world. And why is it that it's a separate learning curve right after I graduate also? And is that why architects take so long to sort of establish themselves? Is that why it takes so many years? Because you're starting right after you also graduate, right? It's like,
You know, one thing I want to poke, because this mention of the doctor came so many times. And second is, in general, also, we always tend to compare ourselves with doctors. Probably just because it's 5 year long course or whatever, I don't know. They are also professional. But the other thing is, I'm wondering that if the doctor is ever so sure, we think that, like, I'm sure that they are always taking guess on what medicine they are giving us, and all the medicines that they give us don't cure us either. So I mean, so in that spirit, I'm just thinking that what if we could really devise new hats for every commission that we approach, and in that sense you get to be a new person every time. But then how productive is that, or how unproductive is that? If any thoughts on?
I had a slightly different approach here, and this is something I constantly fight with the studio that I'm currently working with. And also, there's like a senior architect who just joined, like he has 3 years of experience. But the way he constantly interacts with me, I feel like a lot like he's talked like a contractor. Like I, after a point, believe that isn't there somebody who would do this? Like, why do you need to know? And the reason why I'm coming that, or the gap that we fill in, is that from what I have seen, architects are generally trying to be this mix between a draftsman and a contractor. And the gap, which personally I feel is between space as a concept, has not been very clearly or explicitly mentioned. Like here it is, but I don't know outside. But in education and in the outer world, like people generally don't understand or think about space. Like, and this happened because I started, like, there are one of some of my very old school friends, like with whom I was there since junior kg, and they are, all of our buildings are in redevelopment right now. And as a joke, they would be like, Are, next kar to tu hi banayega. And I mean, I'm happy for that, but like when we talk about that, they all come from this Pinterest board. And in general, across practices, like I keep asking all of my friends what they are doing in their office. Architects start designing, and their first presentation is one PPT with Pinterest images. And I recently went to one of the sites which got completed, and my director was trying to ask me, do you feel any difference? And I was like, it's, I mean, sorry, but it was more or less similar to me. Like the bottom 7 floors of the office looked exactly same like the top floor. And I was like, besides surface decoration, what more were we adding? Like I was not able to understand what they were trying to do. It was mostly just more small rectangle tables in bigger rectangle. And I felt like I used to keep asking him, question kya tha? Like, kyun kiya? The gap which I constantly felt or doesn't come through is like people don't explicitly talk or mention space as something which exists. Like we live through it. And the metric doubt I've been thinking about, but I have not got, like in UI UX when I was working. Now I clearly know how to pitch it to a client, and even in terms of numbers, even in terms of budget. But in space, like this has there had come up with like a discussion few days back in the office only, and I've not been able to pinpoint good metrics of good space which I can quantify for someone, because I feel that's necessary quantification.
Vedika, would you like to add to this discussion about, whether you also perceive this gap, and whether you also feel this kind of tension in the bridging between what you learned and what you go out to do?
Yeah, so I would like to add that when we get out of college, there is a very the whole field is very vast and subjective, which cannot be concised within the 5-year course. However, like one of us just mentioned that it's like we have to start all over again when we go out into the profession, because um, when I went, like it's very different when you see that a building that is just with the foundation and without the interiors happening, the space looks completely different versus when the interiors happen. And so there's a lot of change of the spatial quality which cannot be perceived just behind the books. You need to go and see what is actually happening out there, because even when I was giving interviews, I was like, I have done this, I have done that. They're like, unless you have experience, there's no use of it. It's always that question mark, that where is your experience? I mean, that's a very big gap. What I feel was I wasn't able to achieve throughout my 5-year education. Like, we are taught to imagine, to dream, to design various spaces. However, I just feel that somewhere where that gap between the practicality and the theoretical world can be bridged would help us much more to you know get like a head start when we get out into the profession.
But don't you think that's only a function of time? Like experience is primarily a function of time, and I think, or rather, do you think it can be kind of um, intervened in any other way?
um, I know, I understand that it's a matter of time where you gain experience, but most of the firms, so when I went out, most of the firms don't want to hire you because you don't have experience. So how do we um, you know try to understand where to start from? I mean, if firms are wanting someone with experience, so now if that gap of experience or practical understanding is somewhere covered up in your education, then maybe not every firm is scared in hiring a junior architect.
I also feel at the same time that there are many aspects in which you have better experience than the other. For example, a field like UI UX, or a field like digital architecture, where many of the traditional firms will not have any expertise in, where you really have a strong foot into the thing. So in that sense, you really bypass this whole question of experience, and you bring really something valuable to the table. So I think what you spoke about, subjectivity, is a more interesting question actually to open back and loop into the conversation. That what are these subjective grounds which architects keep on kind of lingering, which actually make their language and definition loose, versus the contractor, which you say are so who are so easily able to talk to each other. And what are these multiplicity? And one more thing that you raised, this whole both of you, I think, raised this idea of space, that we are not able to. You said something to the effect that how people are not able to engage enough about space, while they still being so immersed in it all the time. And so there's no vocabulary of space with people. And how do we enable that? And do you think that is something that could help to some extent in making the bridge from both directions, rather than only you reaching out to them? Milind, please add if you want.
Sure. just wanted to add one more question. Like this was something which I had entered on when I was presenting in KVTF. The last question of our discussion was then, but then, is it necessary to build to be an architect? And if we take in a lot of questions that have come up in the round, they're mostly about that aspect of architecture. Like if I remove that, then if we start talking about questions, maybe we can have a better vocabulary or metric to then talk about space. Like let's just forget about that one for 5 minutes.
Yeah, means taking from your point only, because a lot of us were describing how you couldn't get means, as you said, there is a 5 years of the education, then you start again basically, because you start again because the, so to say, market demands something different, or you were asking, or somebody is saying, "Ki, you don't have experience, so we don't want you," type. But is there any way that you can pitch onto your strength which you have gained across the 5 years? Because you have, like, all of us gets a lot of knowledge about the space and so many things around that, and then only because somebody else who is, let's say, economically more let's say powerful than you at that moment, and he is asking for that particular things, we just try to quickly align to the his question and start finding the answer to that question which has been asked to us after 5 years of something different. Do should we not ask the question, how do I make use of my strength which I have learned in 5 years? Or can it be then open to the many other thing, like what he's saying, if you just ask the question about the space what you have learned, then it might be different. Because if you go to totally new profession, I don't know, new profession for architects now, UI UX is also one of their profession now. But then they would know, you would not talk to them as in and they would not ask you the question like, do you know the tile ka bhav kya hai, or what is the detail for the toilet to not the tap not to leak, kind of questions. But they will hear you out in a very much broader way, and then it might be a different level where you start, as she's saying, you have to start from the down bottom again, because you are not, you say ki we are not trained in that. Then why we, if we are not trained in that, why we are asking a job in that? Should we not ask job which we are trained in? Like, I'm just.
I have a question to that. What exactly are we trained in? Yeah, right. Mhm. I think I think I have one complaint since we are in a college. We need more time for internship, guys. I mean, 6 months it's not enough, and I don't know that if 4.5 years of classroom education is needed, and we can maybe reduce it and give more time for internships. Because what I experienced, and I think most of us can relate, is that just when you get the when you got the ball rolling and you started understanding how the system works, and you know you're back in college, right? So I mean, if we get more,
No?
I did, but then the curriculum stopped me. Thesis ka submission hai, you
No, no,
have
you
this,
can give your thesis after 2 years.
but then I'm extending my education for 2 years. I don't want to do that,
No, not
right?
really, because you earn whatever you are going to spend in your internship.
But like still, like I felt, again, we are trained to think about space. Like for me, if you ask me, definition will be one line, and it wouldn't matter if the scale is at product design or at the city. And that is one thing which I feel a contractor or a builder cannot replace me. because and also like this is one of my active stand. Like right now, a lot of times we discuss these details in the office. I am very okay saying I don't know, and not because like it's a conscious choice, because right now I don't even care genuinely, because I like when I went to one of the working sites in Bangalore, I started asking the contractor. He knew exactly how to put the tile. I asked him certain questions and I was okay with the answer. They made a lot of sense. I was like, okay, go ahead. Like, I don't want to also bother him in what he was doing. But as a very simpler, like, more explicit way, it's about spatial thinking. And again, when we talk about internship, like, it again goes back to them teaching you how to build, or tender drawings or working drawings, or deal with the contractor, or fixing a lintel on some balustrade. Like, but why do we feel that is, like, the reason why I was asking my initial question from the anecdote is, what exactly are architects expecting themselves to be in the field? Because I, for like, I know I don't want to necessarily build at this point in time. Like, I very much don't care like how tile fixes.
No, actually, I think none of them really feel the urgency to build, because all of them are doing very, very different things. But just to kind of bring back Milin's thing, that, uh, and what I understand is that all of you have very interestingly indulged in the 5 year education of architecture and picked certain things, like almost like a constellation, which you dearly associate with, and now you have held them close to you, and you are trying to kind of map these onto the profession, which is giving you a perceived gap. And so, to kind of bring back your question into this, that what are we really trained in, have you ever had the opportunity to reflect back on what are the things I really very closely absorbed in my 5 years of education, and does it have any potential to formulate a practice, okay, which can actually interrogate ways in which, and does it, what value does it hold in the existing kind of scenario, to be able, like, to be able to help you survive through various kinds of, in various dimensions. So just wanting to ask you all that, uh, like, do you all kind of think that there are really aspects that spoke to you in these years, and how can you then go out in the profession and make a really worthwhile practice out of it?
Hello. Yeah, so I really relate to what Ronak was saying about how what we are trained in. Like you said, the most important thing that I absorbed is that we are trained in space. Now, what that means is a lot of layers, which I myself cannot understand completely yet. But I also feel that a very important thing that architects can do, which I learned through my 5 years in C, is that we can be the bridge between conceptualization and actualization. Like, there are people who are just building, like he was pointing out, and there are people who are trying to like work very hard at like research about things and uh, all of those things. So I feel like as an architect, through 5 years, we are trained to go through this process, right? Like, we will go on site, we'll try to understand what people's aspirations are, for example. Like, you're that bridge, that you're understanding what people want, you're trying to conceptualize based on those things, and then you're also capable of going and building that for them, because someone, in the end, someone has to do that with all of this exploration, is what I feel.
I just want to clarify when I said that what are we trained in. I meant that we are the education is so diverse, right? And you're constantly, you're involved in a group project, and you have your own individual project, and you may be doing some competition, right? It trains you to be a very good. You can comprehend problems and you can try to find solutions very very quickly and very creatively. And I think those skills can be applied elsewhere. Someone mentioned that, do you really need to build to be an architect? I mean, you need to be a good problem solver to be an architect. And I'm just trying to, maybe understand we are so much in one direction. This thing about architecture means, built environment, or something to do with not just space, but it has to be more open ended than that, right? Yeah.
So, do you mean to say poets don't solve problems?
I am not saying that only architects solve problems.
Okay, but no, I was trying to kind of ask that because you were trying to place architecture in a problem-solving kind of engineering fashion, no? That there's a problem and then someone needs and I was trying to ask that do we need poets in the society also? Um, but I'll take one last round of questions for all of you from our side, but and then open to all of you, the audience. I was kind of wondering that uh, how easy is it for you all to loosen your ideals while seeping yourself or getting seeped into the profession? And I don't know if you have any strong ideals or you believe in idealism, but any institution and even if so architecture does kind of try to feed you the idealism of aesthetics in whatever way you think of. So yeah, I'm kind of just curious to understand from you all that how do you straddle with your idea, like do you, is it loosening, is it reformulating itself, does it come back to does the profession come back to kind of reinterrogate your established values? Yeah. Any thoughts?
So I'll start by saying that one thing which was taught to us in school was कि you have to be original. You shouldn't be copy pasting someone else's ideas and then maybe superficially pasting it on your problems, and that will never be a solution. But I feel that the moral losing part, this because of the fast pace of projects, sometimes even we are forced to think quickly and maybe even take help from artificial intelligence, as to say sites like Pinterest or maybe some other ideas which people go around searching for. I feel that it might be solution sometimes, but this is something which when I lost my grip on, it was saddening sometimes. Ki, why do I have to always go back to such like leave my idols behind of originality and then go behind such pursuit of ideas? Because sometimes when you think that in times of Louis Khan, when he designed I am Ahmedabad, he actually not just designed, but he also executed with his contractors in a way ki how to build that arch, how to do go about the brick joineries and everything. So like if an architect from that time took that effort to detail the project, I know it went on for 12 years, but that I think there is where we compromise sometimes, the pace that makes you compromise on things.
So I would like to add and say that what I understood while doing my education and after coming out was that rather than just thinking about designing a space, we need to understand that architecture is much more than just building. It's even urban design, it is even product design, it is even film set design. We need to understand these different layers that culminate to form architecture as a profession. We don't have to just think that architecture is all about designing space or giving good spatial qualities to people, but you know various branches of architecture have to also be absorbed as a part of the education and as a part of understanding as to where all you can branch out into. So that's what I feel, that we need to broaden the whole idea of that architecture is just building.
I'd like to add something to that. Hello. Yeah. So, continuing to what you said, I feel over the past few months, with my limited experience, the power of collaboration is something. Hello. I feel the power of collaboration is something that I felt was very necessary for me to get out of my own mindset of few things. Hello. Yeah. The power of collaboration is something that I realized was very much necessary because when I'm working with a person who's practicing permaculture, which is actually sustainable ways of farming, and enabling rural and urban farmers to create such spaces within like the city or outside. I realized that there were so many notions that were set in my head ki, oh, this particular detail will be done like this, but then when you actually sit with the farmers and realize, oh, this is the practice that they've been doing, so that is something that I feel like will come only with practice and with exploration. Saying that, I also feel exploring is a privilege. Right now, I'm struggling between trying to make, trying to explore and trying to find ways to earn money. So are we then, as you said, somebody said about IIM, so then are we then saying that privilege of time and money is something where we can broaden our ideas about or broaden our own mindsets about, or are we saying that that we are working in this particular set of ideas with the commercial aspect to it, and then then come up with innovative ideas? I think the exploration, collaboration, and privilege is something that we should acknowledge and maybe then move ahead with it.
Any more thoughts?
I just want to raise another question we didn't talk about. Um, I mean, we can take time and we can take, if we have that privilege, we can design another IM, but there's still going to be 10 other glass and concrete buildings around it, right? And it is causing another issue, which is climate change. And how do I, as an architect, deal with it? I'm very worried about my future, to be very honest, right? And I mean, we should all be. How many of us believe that Mumbai is going to sink? 40% of Mumbai is going to sink by 2050. I mean, yeah, no, no. What I'm trying to say is we live in that. I mean, I'm trying to say that we live in that willful ignorance that it's not real, and we don't deal with it. So yeah, it's another question I want to throw in this discussion.
I'd like to talk more about what you said about morals, and I feel like, very honestly, when you just start out, holding on to your ideals and morals is a privilege in itself. Because at the end of the day, somebody else is putting in their money, and if they say no to a certain type of things, and to do things a certain way according to your ideals, you have to sort of step down and say no. Um,
I really like the way in which you framed it, but I don't take your reasoning for it. Yes, actually, holding on to your morals can be a privilege also, but I think it's a function of power and position rather than just succumbing someone to money. Like someone putting their money may not have anything to do with morality. Or, I mean, I do not have to sell off my moral uh, to their kind of because they are putting the money, because it may be very self-serving, and it can be a much broader kind of thing. But no, I really like your point on how morality can also be a privilege.
uh, just like giving you an example of something that I faced a few months ago. So we were designing a staff quarter within the house of these clients that we're designing for. And of course, should they have the same kind of ventilation and light that's been given around the entire house? Of course, they should. But the question comes is that it's more expensive to then provide those openings and those windows for them. And if the client says, I don't have the money, like I will not allow that, what can you even say? And
No,
as a,
what do you say? Like, I want to really open that to all of you. How would you deal with it?
I mean, you would obviously put your point across and be like, I feel everybody should have been given that. That's basic, right? But what if then they persist and they say, no, well, this is the money that we have. If it's going over your budget, then, like, deal with it. And I feel like for a well established practice, they can still sort of put their foot down and be like, no, but this is what we feel is important and we are going to do it. I think that's a privilege for many young people starting out. And that's what I meant by saying holding on to your morals is also a privilege.
Anyone else wants to add to this loop, Milind? So, I mean, I have a lot of things to say, but I want to open it to the audience now. If you all have any any thoughts with all this cluster of questions that we have opened up, um, and I have listed a lot of doubts that you all brought to the table. I've filled 5 pages, but yeah, Neil, can we have someone pass the mic?
Hello. Hi. So I am in the fifth year in the current college. So I basically had 2 points to bring up listening to the discussion. The first one is to all the guys in the panels is that constantly there's this idea of education versus profession. So I have seen numerous amount of examples in which the education is adapting to the profession. So for example, in my college, you have these different kind of supplementary courses and allied designs in which you are dismantling the idea of architecture, or you can say rethinking the idea of architecture or the various fields which come with it. So similarly, I mean, you guys have worked in the field. So what do you think as professions? How is the profession adapting to the market? Because when I worked in my internship in 6 months, I can't say the name of the firm, but it was very rigid and there was no any movement of adaptation to the market. They are very rigid and it's very slow process which you can't tap in. The second thing which I wanted to actually ask the faculties in my college is that now that we are rethinking this idea of education in and the way you teach student, so more like adapting. Now that I think of it, it's more like escapement from the existing profession because it's becoming more like अगर मैं नहीं बनाऊंगा वो बिल्डिंग तो मेरे ऐसे सिविल इंजीनियर्स है और अगर वो भी नहीं है तो और 25,000 आर्किटेक्ट्स हर साल ग्रेजुएट होने वाले. So it's becoming more like escapement from the profession more than adapting. So this is what the education has become now, is what I think.
Anyone wants to respond to that from you all or from the audience?
So to answer that, how is the profession filling up the gap? Is that there are two kinds of firms that we can come across, as at least what I have come across. One is one kind of firm that is very rigid, what follow the old tradition of using CAD and do not accept new ideas, and keep on doing the same, deciphering the DCPR norms, and building buildings and just doing the facade development. But there are other kind of studios that are coming up which accept these new ideas and they want to understand what the new generation is bringing into the market. They are willing to accept these ideas, they are willing to find newer solutions. So if you build a door in a certain way, they are willing to explore it with you, that what do you want to build. So I feel that's where they are in some way filling up the gap, wherein they involve you in discussions, they involve you and try to understand what ideas are you bringing down to the table. So I feel that is one.
So you mean to say that go and work with firms that are open to exploration rather than those who are not?
It's your personal choice, I mean.
That's what.
Yeah, like, I mean,
So you choose to go to a place where they are more open.
yeah, like more studio based, smaller firms where
But the
they are
irony of the
super.
matter is that those who are not open need to be really kind of pushed to, and that's where we need to doubt them. And how do we induce that doubt into them is probably what Neil is also asking.
But I feel right now it's like they are at that level of power where they are known and they've established their selves that
You
they don't
seem to
want to
be
like.
very bothered with experience. Like, I think your hook is I don't have experience, but I think there's no need to self victimize yourself so much. I think you really need to find ways of. Sorry, I don't need me to give you gyan, um, uh, uh, but um, but I think uh, experience is just how do I put it? You can show people a different kind of space by from your position, and that may be your USP.
If I
So
can add to what you're saying.
yeah.
Hello. I feel like we keep falling into this trap of hopelessness, like कि नहीं हो गया अभी, like either you have to accept that this person is doing this kind of work and just join that. So मतलब नहीं है तो we can do it ourselves also na, like that's not a problem. Like that's what I realized through how it was a very like random thing that I started the practice, but it was because of the pandemic. And if it was in a normal sense, even I would have joined some office probably and then said ki these are the kind of things they're doing. But I feel like it's so it's so ingrained at this point, like the conversations about space and like quality of space or whatever, that uh, I thought it is best to just get into it by myself and then try to see how that works. And it works fine, like it's not a problem. It's working. Okay. I feel like it's better to, have your own ideas, go into the field, and you'll definitely find people to collaborate with, right? Who are doing the similar kind of thing or different kinds of things, whatever. So I don't think we need to accept anyone in any way.
Hi. So, experience, there are firms, you need to explore. It's not that there are, they just say that, and if they say, you can tell them that if you don't give me experience, you don't give me a chance, how will I get experience? That kind, as simple as that. Okay, coming to that point, that, this internship thing is bang in the middle of the and exactly when we are getting comfortable and the students are getting comfortable, it's time for them to leave. So obviously it would make a lot of sense to keep it up, so 4.5 years, and then at the end of it, and then you continue. That would be ideal. But yes, definitely what it matters is sometimes that when you get that kind of experience and then you go back, and of course you all have to you need to adapt to things and to whatever comes along. So this builder lobby and all these things are definitely something, bothersome sometimes, but you have to find your own niche in the entire market depending on what kind of practice you want to do eventually. And it will always, you will take about 5 to 10 years to actually understand where you stand, what actually you like, what is that you love to do. When you come to that point, then you'll be more confident in saying that no, I would like to work with a builder, I would want to become a contractor or something like that. So it will take time. It might be a bit too early to yet come to this conclusion. Yep. Okay.
Hi, I'm Nitin here. Actually, I teach in Rachna Sansad at Prabhadevi. Um what I feel, at some point we lose the patience. We all of us actually lose patience, and one is we need to keep patience in this field at every point. We have 200 minds or 300 minds right now. Every mind is different. Every mind is talking differently. Every mind is absorbing things differently. So every space is different for us. And I've been practicing only interior design, and there are so much multiple options in interior designing also. So in architecture, though, you have a lot of options which are actually open. So you need to explore yourself first, rather than like asking questions to others. Then the second thing what I thought is, when you deal with a client, okay, you actually study the client every now and then. You have to learn from that client also what is expected, because there is always power, there is always position when you're trying to execute. executing, that time you get the experience. And when that experience happens, automatically you start developing your own self. So there is always a difference between an education and a profession, which I've always seen. Education is like you're just coming out of an eggshell, but there is a lot of things which you need to learn, which I always tell my students or anybody who comes in the way, keep learning. Don't stop yourself from learning. Because if you stop the day when you are learning, I feel you will not adapt to something which is there in the outside world. I always take that as a positive thing. Every day when I start in the morning, I say what I'm going to learn today. I always question myself. I mean, are we not? I mean, I always think about it. Okay, fine. If it is negative, how can I convert it into a positive aspect? How can I convert that small thing into a positive thing? How can I convert that negative space into a positive space? Because we all talk in space language. Our language is space, our language is line, our language is drawing. Then how to get balance in life? That is all what we are all about.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. I think Vedika. So I just was wondering. I mean, we've spoken about questions of money, morality, education, experience. I was wondering how does it work out when you're, you know, thinking about building on Mars? I mean, how does all of that sort of work out in terms of experience or knowing norms or all of these economics? Does it help you in thinking about your practice or the kind of questions that you're asking in your practice? I was just curious about that.
Yeah, actually, so that whole topic is that whole topic is pretty theoretical based, but it opens up your mind in terms of understanding from the basics, as in somewhere or the other today we take all our surrounding things for granted, like our wind, our our sunlight and all of that. But when you design for extreme environments, so the whole idea was to design for an extreme environment and understand that how these, like it's like a back calculation kind of a thing, wherein you make these things so important that without them you'll die. So the whole idea was to understand and be very sensitive towards your design, one, and second, in the process of research, understanding how different technologies can be used to ease or to develop architecture even on earth. So for example, like a very basic thing, like when you design in outer space, you need a closed loop system. So that can be reciprocated in our designs on earth, wherein you can have closed loop systems and find sustainable solutions to go off the grid. So deriving these kind of understandings, that was the whole idea of taking up that topic and exploring this way of understanding architecture and using it in today's.
Which is interesting. Like what Prasad was asking is that architects have the potential to doubt the fundamental aspect of reality itself, and can that become a way to even turn the tables of discussion for any potential person. Like we are, I mean, as much as we think that uh, the perceived gap is in the strong rooting of our thing in reality, but can things be also changed by just making things more unreal for things, for people? Uh, but any more questions?
Just to continue that reality thing, na, I'm just thinking that in reality, the client is, unfortunately for architects and unlike doctors, like doctors, the client is very clear, the person who pays and person who operates. For architects, unfortunately, the client is not the people who pay. That's the problem. That is the people who live, the environment which gets affected. You live, there are so many generations which happen after that, so many things that you affect, etc. All of those people, all of those things are clients. So then, then whether you want or no, you become a custodian of culture and environment, irrespective of whether you want or no. That is the difficulty with architects. And then what do? You can be crude engineers and try to kind of solve the climate change issue, or make it affordable and stuff like that. That is one way. But I'll tell you one thing. I mean, we are doing some study of on architecture education, and we realize that in this country, 90% of the people do not get architectural services from trained architects. 90% in this country. They don't get it now. And even those who get it, like what she said, no, that this is like 60% of that, out of the remaining 10, are doing these kind of second homes and elite houses. So what? I mean, where is where is the relevance question that all of you were asking? No? So that's the key. So figure out ways to enter that 90%, and figure out ways to kind of expand your client beyond that. I think there is the way. And how do you do it? I cannot teach. Like it's kind of I can only say this is a problem. There are certain things which the school can teach. There are certain things which school cannot teach. You have to learn it when you are kind of I can tell give you a book on cycling, but that doesn't mean that you can cycle. It's like that. You have to kind of you have to figure out that way. How do you do that? That's the question. Whether the school has kind of trained you to navigate that part, that is what the school can do. Whether you can identify the problem, whether you can enter that issue. Otherwise, you will be in the reproductive business. You will be reproducing whatever we see around. And we kind of, and then there are all the awards which validate it. And there are all the star guys who kind of, do that, which is nonsense, 10%. So that's the thing. So figure out the way. And I think that's the entry point, really.
Just wanted to add, sorry, my voice is gone. But I just wanted to add, how do you, it's really gone. How do you induce doubts into what we otherwise understand as the real world? You know, and there are so many instances where we say, I mean, just a simple example of a mall, the type of a mall. If you look at the example of Charles Correa dealing with a mall that came to him, he said that glass box is not going to work even economically for the client, because we've seen that so many cases of malls in Bombay itself that have failed. They have made the client bankrupt, right? Because it is completely unsustainable to have that box in this climate. So he said, no, you cannot do that. You have to rethink the type. We have so many examples of how bazaars have worked in our context. You allow it to ventilate in different ways. You allow people to come in who are not necessarily coming to buy your products, but you draw in people into the place, and that actually makes so much more even economical sense for the client, right? So how do you induce those doubts within society? And you are trained to do that, right? You're trained to do that, and people are not stupid. People are not stupid. It's possible to be able to speak to people, to raise those doubts and say that this is not going to work for you, and the future really requires us to have those dialogues. So I think that's really, really important for us to hold on to.
Well, here's the person. Sorry, my voice is also gone. But she has really raised these doubts. Very importantly, we didn't discuss it, or maybe I missed it. But she talked about the conflict of interest between architect as a creator of space and the user of the space. And she mentioned a very, very important issue, which is very currently not discussed, but very currently ruining our cities, is that when you go high rise, the space between the two buildings is not even compared to what the issue of light and ventilation is completely ignored. And what does light and ventilation issue lead to is the health. So this is a conflict between what the, and it's not only the architect is a designer, it's also as the who's why can't you, why don't you live wider spaces? And what was the problem in your case when you designed the high rises, or when your office designed the high rises? What came in between? Why could you not give them wider spaces? No, not only, I mean, that's much later. Your development control rules are modified in such a way that you don't need to, although it is high rise and high density housing, the space between the two buildings is drastically reduced by law. So now this is the place where you have to raise your doubts, because it matters. I mean, it is not just one architect and one client. This is one architect and probably one builder who's designing for thousands and lakhs of people, and their quality of life and especially health is in danger. So how do we bring this out? So when it says that we have to induce these doubts, it's a very important issue today. And there are forums. You have to find out which forum you can do that. You know, there has been already a lot of discussion on the BDD chawls, which are 75 storied high, and on what is going to be the space, open space. So you will have to participate in these discussions and participate in these um, debates, and also talk to your employers. No, talk to. I'm certainly not expecting that you will change the mind, because the market is ruling everywhere. But still, these discussions can start happening. These discussions are not happening. It just says, "हाँ ये rule में है ना, तो हम क्यों ज़्यादा देंगे?" So
Yes,
this
very
would be
much.
the difference.
Very much. And I think, many of you kind of express this stifling of the policy, that there is so much policy and we can't go beyond it. But I think there have been examples started at academy by the Mumbai study group, and then the Dharavi plan, which was really forcefully pushed back. And these were things that were, I would say, movements of doubt that really started from the student body and the academic space. So I think, rather than feeling overwhelmed or intimidated by policy, you have to really push your doubt onto them, which is a very relevant kind of doubt, and find a way to gain, like, mobilize a momentum and build consensus in order to kind of overturn that. And it has happened in the past. So certainly that is something. When you ask about, that about aspects of parking, and we don't know, it doesn't make commercial viability. I think a very counterpoint to it is that, do we really want more cars? Because on one hand you're talking about, I may have misunderstood you, but on one hand we are talking about climate change, and on the other hand we are also talking of giving the right amount of parking. And so, yeah, these things really need to be doubted again, that do we really need to consider so much private parking vehicles and all these things, when we are talking of other concerns at the same in the same breath.
Uh, uh, I would like to add something to what Rupali and Neera were saying. So I feel like Rupali was saying, it's full of these myths, right? Like economics hai to aisa karna hai. But then, like, when you actually go ahead and study these things, like, I'll keep on bringing you back to the builder thing again. But when you study the DCR, firstly we need to study it to even challenge like whatever is there in it. So once you study these things, you realize that actually without any loss of money, you can do the same element or spatial element in a very different way, which increases the space in a, like, increases the quality without anyone facing any loss. Like, that is what is the shield that people are behind, right? Like, there is a loss of money. So I feel like if we're able to just start by tweaking these elements, like smaller elements, then we might get there, probably.
Jatan, is there a mic around you? Okay.
Hello. I was just thinking the state of delirium and doubts which we started with certainly got articulated in these ideas of gap, and the gaps were quite clear between the education and the kind of the fresh graduate architect, and also the professional or the other world. What I was wondering was, it suddenly became the architect suddenly became an advocate of a good space, whereas Sania's first provocation of where she wanted to talk about window when everyone was talking about the FSI becomes much more wonderful to think about what would be a good window, or kind of where do we start this rather have doubts in the kind of idea of a good space also at the same time. And the idea of language and aesthetics also would kind of bring up new typologies and all these things. Also, what Rupali was saying about the kind of how a new typology emerges in the in the economic landscape, and kind of smart reading of an economic landscape. But at this, but that advocacy of a good uh, a good building or a good architecture, and also and this idea of gap also kind of creates this renders this suffocating space of for ourselves, which it might not be, but that kind of idea of gap kind of accentuates that.
Are you saying that design a good window and leave the
I'm
rest?
I'm saying main problem is to find that language. It's a language which will allow us to talk about a window where everyone is talking about FSI. That was the kind of main
Right,
idea.
right, right. Yeah, that's a very nice point. Maitri?
Hi. So I finished. I graduated a year and a half back, and I was working in an office. And what happened was, like, school was great. I studied here, and we did all these fun things. We learned quite a lot of different things, and that was really nice. And I was really excited to, like, go and do something with it. And then I went and started working, and then you realize that, oh my god, wait, this is quite different from everything that I've been around for like 5 years. And that's when this thing, that there was like this split that happened in myself, where I was something else and what I was doing was something completely different. So my morals and everything had gotten very confused, and I was like, okay, now what do I do? That then I panicked a lot, and I didn't know what to do for a very long time. Eventually, after talking to like Rupali a lot and figuring something out, I realized that what happens is we learn a lot in school, and it becomes like this superpower that we have, that we understand a lot of things at this point, and we've studied so many different chapters of so many different stories. And the thing is, we know this, but people outside don't exactly, they're not on the same page. It's never possible for everybody to be on the same page. So, like with superheroes, when they say that with great power comes great responsibility. So I just feel like then when we go out, it becomes like a responsibility to sort of spread this. You have to keep teaching it, not in the most basic way, but you have to keep pushing to explain that this is how it can also be. And that requires a lot of patience, because like Prasad earlier used to say, I don't know if he still says it, that that people are not tolerant anymore. They're like this this is why I clarified. So, like, just like people want everything fast. They don't want to think, they don't want to wait and listen. Everything has to go like that. But then you have to maintain that position of saying that, okay, I will be tolerant and I will push through whatever, in the most patient way possible that I can. And there was one more point, yeah. And also about this you're doing on one side. On the other side, I feel you have to keep building on what you like a lot of people said that, like, your practice, like, you have to build your practice. You have to understand where you stand and how you position yourself in this world, because through that understanding of your position, you will be able to push your understanding, and you not push, but you will be able to explain it better to everybody else. And maybe then you'll start to see like a little change somewhere. But I just feel like for everybody who's like sort of confused right now, because even I was, I just feel like it's a lot of patience and figuring out yourself a little better in the field and in the world, the entire context basically, to then get a better understanding of how to, yeah.
I think I'm just thinking completely in some different realm, I guess. Means I means when I graduated, I think the similar doubts were there. Means, almost nothing has changed, and same kind of a contradiction was there, and then whatever. But I think the struggle is not between understanding the doubts and the gaps. We know that very well. Every time you discuss, we know this. The struggle, I think, is in the aspiration. The aspiration which educational space creates, as in what is your role as an architect in the society, what the education creates or the school creates, it's completely different when you go out. And then whole things you doubt, or then the struggle happens is it the society thinks that architects should build a good looking, beautiful, nice, which gives the meaning to their streetscape kind of architecture, and then that is the everybody wants. And we have been taught in various different way that this space makes the behavior and this experience and all that, and nobody is currently uh, putting this toward the aspiration. So I think then that the struggle is there, that should I be a should I should I keep working towards the aspiration that I had developed myself in a 5 years, that this is what we need to be, or just because of the various conditions linked when you are into the practice, and then they say that you don't have to worry about the policies, and you don't have to worry about the space, and but you just produce this because then you can become a architect. And then that is a I think that is where the a real struggle lies, where uh, what is means it is the problem. I think what she Maitre is also saying is what she understood in the 5 years as aspirations to be an architect, and what was there when they went out, somebody is telling you some completely different, and these people are doing completely different thing, and they are seen as a heroes in the architectural field. So should I take this path, or should I continue on my older one which have been was there? And I think there where the whole then the idea of patience and perseverance and privilege, and how much time you can struggle with this idea, all those starts coming. It's not about not knowing what is there outside in the everybody knows what is it gonna be there. It's not like we are unknown to the, because every year we have these discussions, not once, maybe 500 times about this, that the market is asking for something else, no? So to call market, and still we are into this realm of academics, where we are still teaching you in a some different way, and then creating a different aspirations. And then when you go out, I guess that is the struggle, where you have to think through key. The same is with your family, na? The family thinks you as a successful architect in a very different picture as against your professor, maybe. So that is where the struggle happens, when that is the 5 years cut time somebody through the space and everything, and then your the mom and dad suddenly asking different question, what is it happening, and you cannot talk. I think there you find that you don't have a language to describe what I want to achieve and all thing. I think there we need to think, because these doubts and gaps and everything what we discuss, I think they are there from that. I remember from the same time the builder lobby, and then the calculations and DCRs, and all of this is almost as is when it was like 50 years back or 20 years back. I'm not so old, sorry. So 20 year backs maybe, yeah. So just need to think through that, what is our mm, education or the school is aspiring us to be, training us to be, and what is the otherwise society thinking us of to be. Yeah.
I have a question to all the professors and people who have been through this road where we are right now. If we fight through it with patience, and right now these doubts are very uncomfortable for me, right? So what happens after a certain time? Does these doubts disappear, or do I get more comfortable with these doubts? I really want to know that.
Yeah, Milind just said no, like how comfortable are you of letting go the aspiration? Maybe like like if I want to perceive it, or at what point am I willing to let go? But
Dhruv, you want to add before?
Yeah, so like I wanted to like add to what Millen was saying about the aspiration and all, like how like after 5 years our aspiration is again relating it to the idea of doctor, like how the aspiration of a doctor is to become a surgeon. Like in architecture also we are trying to be like that, become a surgeon of like starting a house from a scratch and making it. But the 60 to 70% of housing, like where I stay, like I have not seen a single architect working for like 20 years. So they need those doctors who just prescribe medicines. And like Anuj told, like I don't know whether the medicines work or not, but we can try. So like we just like need to be those agents who, like the bridge gappers who just prescribe something rather than doing the whole surgery, and being a surgeon architect, and just prescribe something which is being an agent between the bridge between those two. So I think then we'll be like able to tap in those 60% of housing which is there, which really don't need to be the architects of their whole house, but need some consultation or suggestions on their housing. Yeah.
It's interesting, and I think it's time to close. So one last thing, that it's interesting that you are mentioning about how doctors' ka next step is to become a surgeon, whereas I am kind of thinking about the trouble of intelligence itself. You know, that you know I am trying hard to become dumber because I think that'll make my life easier, and that'll also, in some sense, make and I think just to kind of bridge it to your that what happens eventually. Uh, I think. Remember this when I went to America. I was living with a 70-year-old person who was a playwright, and there were many. That was the first cultural shift for me, and so I was kind of trying to figure many things out. And and then once I asked him that how do you kind of really uh, figure this out, and he said that you don't really need to. And if you ever come across, like, people are always kind of projecting a certain kind of confidence, so you really don't need to give in to that all the time. And this is something that I realized later. And then he gave me a very interesting mantra. He said that what I do is, when someone says that, oh, that red color really looks good on that building facade, I simply turn to them and say, you think so? And so I think that's the thing, that you go with that kind of measured doubt, where you allow for someone to have their opinion, but you also kind of give them the opportunity to be doubtful about it. So and in that, I think what the note that we circulated in some sense comes to its life, that in doubting we create a conversation. In doubting, you allow someone to enter into your territory, your mental space, and making new friends and opening up a new world which is stands on the real ground, but can be lived and enjoyed in another reality. So I think with that, it's already 7:15, and I would like to thank all of you for participating in this conversation. There were lovely things that came through this conversation. It's really nice to see all of you opening these things up through your doubts. Um, and I would like my student team to present you with a small kind of gesture of doubts, which is our first questions, the book that we produced, and a Mumbai modern poster which the school has produced. So if you all can bring it for our participants, it will be lovely. And all of you, I invite you all to the exhibition volumes that is opened, or rather we'll open with you today. at the ground floor. And it's an exhibition which was brought together after the 2 years of pandemic, and so it's in the space of digital and physical, and so you will see that what we have done is we have kind of made an index of key ideas that were produced at the school in the last year. And this index kind of takes you into a whole space of archives, which will talk in more detail about the work that was done at the school. So I welcome you all, the members of Suvidya Prasarak Sangh, our partner trust, our trustees, schools, teachers, to you know, engage and immerse themselves into the volumes that we have produced at the school. Also, in addition, I would like to say that I mean, our school is hosting, as a part of the annual week, an international conference called Noise Fields, and it's going to happen tomorrow. It's online, so you don't need to worry about traveling, but you can kind of join us online, the links of which are available on our website. And there is another conference called Soundings, which will happen along with practitioners in our city and nearby cities on Saturday. So if you have the chance to be around and visit, please do participate in the Soundings conference. The details are all mentioned on our website, so you will be able to kind of find your way here if you would like to join us. So please do continue to be around for dinner, and thank you all for joining.